Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good evening. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next hour here on Radio Hamra. To begin, I think what's on most Iranians' minds right now is Iran itself and what is happening there. And I'm sure, as all of you listening, I've also just been seeing so many videos, pictures, posts about what is going on there. And I will start off by saying, as much as I've looked at a lot of things, read a lot of things, I can't say I know everything that's going on about the situation, but I can say that I am hopeful, maybe cautiously optimistic. I think for many Iranians, what I hear and I feel myself is that we're hoping this time will be the time, but we know that there's been other times before where we thought it was going to happen, and so we don't know really what to expect. And so I think we are feeling that way, or I could say I'm feeling that way again. And it feels different often. It feels different almost every time. I think after Mahsa Amini, there was this very strong feeling that it did feel different with what was happening and how angry people were, and having the movement start and really have momentum for so long. And yet we're here, more than 3 years later, and still fighting that same battle or in that same position. First and foremost, as I'm sure all of you can relate, for those of us outside of Iran, and I'm always just amazed by and in awe and humbled by the courage of the people in Iran who, knowing how brutal the regime is and what they do to people who disagree with them and who protest and who put themselves out there, knowing that they can face everything from punishments that are lenient to punishments that include death, torture, and everything in between. There are so many Iranians of all ages, but a lot of young Iranians who are out there and who want a different life, and they want a different regime, and know that this is not the one that represents them. And so, as always, I'm humbled and inspired by them who are there. I can't even imagine the courage it takes to stand up to this regime, and they're doing that and making us all very proud by doing so. I also, a lot of the sentiments I've felt before, I feel them now. I will talk about the situation in different ways. I'm sure I'll talk about it, a lot of times on my show. But I also try to always keep in mind that I don't in any way try to speak for the people in Iran, especially. I can't speak for any group, but especially the people who are in Iran, and especially to direct or give advice or say what should be done. It's always easy in every way to give advice to someone else when we're not living their life. It's even easier when you don't have to face the pain or the consequences, and you might receive some kind of benefit. In this case, all of us want a free Iran. We think it's the right thing, and we all want to have our country back. But when we're not the ones who have to pay the prices, it's very easy to just say, this is what the people there should do. But I think that's always something we have to be cautious of, to try to give advice or to give guidance in this kind of a situation. So I don't in any way want to say I have something to say in that area, other than, as I mentioned, just being so proud and humbled by the people of Iran and what they've already done. And yes, of course, I'm hoping for it to be swift, and most importantly for it to happen, that there is a revolution and regime change there. I just know it's, of course, very complicated to see how these things happen. And something I mentioned back in, I guess, was September of 2022 was, I hope it happens very quickly. Hopefully it's the next show I do, it'll already have happened, or things will be very clearly in place. But often it takes longer than we might think. So we have to be patient and persevere in whatever ways we are involved or supporting, that this process is not something that we should expect will change overnight. With revolutions, I've heard some quotes like they seem impossible until they become inevitable, meaning it seems like it's not going to happen, and then one day it almost seems like it can't not happen. It just has to happen. And so maybe that's happening here. I hope so, with so much of the economic issues that are in play. It's sad to say this, but almost always money speaks louder than anything else. So when the financial aspect comes into play and the pressures come into play, often that could be a very important deciding factor. In my own reading and research on revolutions, and I think the title of the book I read, including others, was called On Revolutions. Um, it was very important that the economic factors be something that are part of the process, because almost always that has to be there for will be, something that leads to change, and that will be an important factor pushing things forward. But I know there's no way to know for sure what will be happening here. I did want to say a few words about um, all of us in general outside of Iran, of course, includes the people of Iran itself. But when we're trying to make any kind of very big change, one, as I was saying, it could take longer than we think, and we have to be patient and persevere. And very importantly, it's important that we work together, which of course can sound like a very obvious statement, and is, but it's not as many things that are simple, easy to execute necessarily, and sometimes we can have challenges with that. And so again, here we see that if you go online or you hear people talking, that there is a lot of people who might think they want the same thing in some way, like let's say regime change in Iran, but because they differ on what they think should happen next or how it should happen, they might actually work against each other or almost cancel out each other's efforts, which is really, really sad to see. And if that were to be a result, it's kind of like we're trying to push this incredibly heavy object that it's going to take all of our strength to do so, but we're arguing about how to push it or who should push which part or the form we should use or what day to do it on or whatever it might be. And because of that, or we might push in different directions, and so we literally cancel out each other's efforts. I'm trying to push it to the right, you're pushing it to the left, someone's pushing it this way, so we all want to move it, but because we're pushing not in unity and not in harmony, but against each other, we actually cancel each other out, and that thing won't move. And that's going to happen here if we're not unified. It already is hard enough for things like this to happen, to have a whole revolution, or for there to be regime change and to take down a whole system of government. It's obviously takes a lot, because the people who are in power have exactly that, the power, and they have the resources and access to so many things that will make it very hard to overthrow that. It does happen, obviously, throughout history, but it does take a lot of effort. But if the effort of those who even want the change isn't unified, it could become damn near impossible. And so I think you see that, and people commenting or people saying, well, people want this or they want that, or what's supposed to happen. And I hope we can first and foremost agree that all of us that agree with this notion that the regime must go, we can all rally behind that, and really not criticize one another, or not think we have the perfect plan, or we know what is supposed to happen, or we know what other people are trying to do and we have to stop them. Let's stay together and stay unified as much as we can, because that's going to be necessary. And I was mentioning about being humbled by the people of Iran, and I hope we can also hold on to that type of intellectual humility when it comes to these kinds of things. We can think we know the answers, exactly how it's supposed to go down or what's supposed to happen next, but these things are so complex that for anyone to say they know the exact right way that everything should go from now till whatever comes afterwards, I think that's just an illusion or a delusion that someone might have for themselves, that they have all the answers. It's not going to be that simple, and we have to understand that no one has all the answers. That's okay. We have to just push in the right direction. Doesn't mean we have to know exactly everywhere we're going to go or everything we're going to do in that direction, but just go in the right direction altogether, and not be so fixated on the exact process. So I just see a lot of this infighting, and we saw it last time too. And it's still you do see this. I think right now it's still fresher, it's still new, so it's starting to show its face. But I hope we don't go in that direction. So, as sure as you might be that you know exactly what should happen and what's going to make everything go in the right direction, I hope we can all maintain that intellectual humility that we don't know. These things are very, very complex, from who should be involved or who should intervene to what's going to happen. Um, it's hard to know how these things play out. I think the value that most people agree on is the regime should go. That's the most important one, and that's what we should rally behind and rally together with. But the other things, I hope we won't let that get in the way of making the progress that we're hoping or helping to make that progress in whatever way that we can. And for those of us outside of Iran, there isn't a whole lot we can do, or there is a whole lot, but it can seem insignificant at times. But something I talked about last time in 2022, and I mentioned this a few times or many times because I think it's very important, is that we want to focus not specifically on results and get attached to the results. Of course, the result is why we're doing it, so we're wanting something to happen. So I'm not saying we don't care about the results, but that our focus be less on the results, because sometimes those are slow, take time, don't look exactly the way we expect them to or we want them to. But instead, focus on our own personal responsibility of what we can do, which is all that we can do, of course, and focus on that part. Am I doing everything in my responsibility, my power, and my control to help, whatever that might be, from posting on social media, which can seem insignificant, but definitely has an impact, to going to protests wherever they are and making your voice heard and bringing attention to what is going on, to possibly doing creative works of art that might bring attention or capture people's hearts and minds and get them focused and help bring about change. Whatever it is that you can do, focus on that part. And one way you could think about that is to go forward in time, whether or not, and hopefully, well, let's just say the revolution does happen. But if you look back on this time, will you regret what you did or what you didn't do? Especially, it's probably the didn't do part of your own responsibility, that, I wish I could have done more and I didn't. And that this also goes for me as well. We all can think about that and to focus on what is my personal responsibility rather than, as I said, the results that may not happen and likely won't happen overnight. Because when we want to do something that can take a long time and definitely takes a lot of effort, it of course requires us to stay motivated, stay inspired, stay focused. And those aren't easy things, especially if we think it should happen quickly or it will happen soon, or this feeling that, well, I've tried so hard and nothing happens, so it must mean it doesn't make a difference. And so then we give up completely. And this is often what happens. This is what the regime is hoping for. It's not that they can necessarily overpower the people and the will of the people forever. Can they cause enough disunity, something they're also trying to contribute to for sure, and withstand the movement long enough until it starts to lose some of its movement, starts to lose some of its momentum, and then things can stay in the status quo. They know it's impossible if you have everyone united to overpower them, but you can possibly do it for a short amount of time, and especially if it's not everyone all together all at once in the same direction. So we have to keep our own patience and our own perseverance, and I think that's a lot easier when we focus on what you're doing more than anything. Of course, we're going to pay attention. If you see good news, the results will motivate us in great ways. I'm not saying don't care about that, but because the results often don't come the ways that we think. People have been protesting for, I don't know if today's considered day 8 or maybe already you're on day 9, but whatever it is, that could be a short amount of time. But if we think nothing has changed and a couple more weeks go by, it might make us feel there's that sense of, oh, here we go again. We think it's going to be this time, but maybe it's not, and so maybe it's not worth the effort, or maybe I shouldn't try. And we all have goals that we set that we might work towards, and if we don't see results, we give up, unfortunately. But if you know what you're doing is right, you just keep doing what's right and have faith that the right results will follow, and that you feel good that you did everything you could to make that happen. So I hope we all will do all that we can and do our part to support those people in Iran. Sometimes what we can do, especially compared to the prices they have to pay, you can't even compare them. But we only can do what we can do. So I hope you'll do whatever it is that is in your power and whatever it is in your responsibility to do to help support the people of Iran. I know people are, as I said, excited, but I feel like at times it's cautious optimism. We're excited, hopeful, but we're also afraid to hope because we've hoped before and didn't see the change happen that we were hoping for. But we have to be brave enough to hope again and have faith again that this can be the time. Any change that happened almost never happened the first time that people thought it was going to happen or the change was going to happen. It usually takes a lot of time for those things to happen. So this can definitely be the time. Let's do everything we can to support that in happening. Let's go to our first commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As I mentioned to start the show, on almost all of our hearts and minds is what's happening in Iran currently, and hoping that we see change happen and happen soon. Already, I know I've read different reports of 20 to 30 protesters who have been killed and many others injured and imprisoned. And so there's a literal human cost here that is taking place. So I know we are all hoping for this to just change and change soon. When I think back to 2022, and of course, it's not that things just started there and stopped there, but becoming a father gives you a different perspective on, I think, almost everything, but so many things of life, and even just the hope for the future. I always had a hope for the future and would think about it and would wish for the best. When you see your child's eyes and you see the world through your child's eyes, I think it can add a different layer to that wish for a better future. Also, this clear hope and belief that they will make it even better, but the time that you have before they take over, to do whatever you can to make things better and to make things change. And even just, my son's name is Kian, and that name has significance when it comes to what is happening in Iran for us, because we named him after Kian Pir Falak, who was tragically killed just a few months into the protests. It was in November of 2022 that he was killed. And there is this very sad but very meaningful connection that I share with my son, Kian, that I hope that connection ends with him, or that legacy ends with him, which I'll explain. Because I also was named after someone who was killed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, Badiullah Farid. So his last name was actually Farid, and I was given that as my first name by my parents. And he was killed in June of 1981. So just less than a year before I was born, for being a Baha'i in Iran. And 1981 was shortly after the revolution took place. So not too long after that, he was killed for being just for his religion, and because there's this incredibly intolerant regime there who rules by fear and killing and horrible things, thinking that that will be the right way to take care of things, which of course is not. And I'm looking forward to the day that that will end. But I was named after him. Of course, because he was killed before I was born, never got to meet him, but I did actually meet some of his children, or knew them actually for some years, and also even his grandchildren. But I heard he was a wonderful man, and that's why my parents wanted to name me after him. And so I was named after him, and I really treasure that. My name, being born and raised in the United States, Farid is not a name that Americans can say at all or easily, and it's always a challenge. So I always had this mixed feeling about my name, especially the pronunciation of it, and trying to say it or have people say it, or so I saying it in a different way. And with Americans, often it's Farid is more common or often used, and I've used that before. But it doesn't feel kind of quite right. So I had this interesting connection or relation with my name, as I think a lot of Iranians do, if they've been given, or a lot of just immigrants or children of immigrants will have, when their name is hard to be pronounced, or at least isn't common in the culture that they're growing up in. So I always had that, but I always did have this connection to its significance, especially as I got older, as a young child. You can't really contemplate these things so well. But as I got older, that significance became much more important to me, and that connection to the name became much more important to me. And so I'm actually grateful for that, my name. Um, of course, the surroundings of it are very tragic, that it had to be the death of someone, but I wear that with honor, that this was the name given to me, a man of great honor who made the ultimate sacrifice for what he believed in, and in standing up and to a hateful regime and hateful government. And so when it came time to name our son, I always even liked the name Kian as a Iranian name, that because of my own experience, having people having trouble pronouncing it and spelling it and all of that. I always liked the name Kian as a Iranian name that would be easier for Americans. So, if I had a son and he was here, that he would have an Iranian name and still have that part of his heritage there, but something that would be easier in that sense, socially and just for his day-to-day life. So I did always like that name, but then when we were thinking of names, and with what happened with Kian Pirfalak, just maybe 2.5 years or so before our son was born, and him becoming a tragic symbol of the movement, and really also just how brutal the regime is, that even a child could be killed, and then all the horrible things they did around his killing, and try to blame certain people and make people take the blame, and just really horrific things. As many, and I think all Iranians, I was heartbroken and very touched by the tragedy of his loss, and seeing the videos of him and pictures, just heartbreaking. I still feel a lot, especially now with Kian's name, even more when I see those pictures or videos of him. And so it felt like something important and meaningful to give that name to our son. I'll say I even got some people that said you shouldn't, because something bad happened, the kind of the superstitious types of thoughts that we can have. So I did get that message from people that this is not, if it's for that reason, maybe you should not do it. But that was not something that was going to stop us. We thought it was the right thing to do, and we were very proud of that. And so I, of course, love my son more than anything I've ever loved in my life. But his name is also so special for me too. And now it's so associated with him. When I hear that name, Kian, it brings up so many emotions, but it's always going to be connected to that young boy as well. And the life that was taken from him, the unlived life. When I shared that we had named our son Kian, and after Kian Pirfalak, I shared what I still feel to be very true, is that I'm honored and grateful to name our son after him, but I wish we couldn't, in the sense that he shouldn't have been killed. I wish that he was not killed. This young boy deserved to live the rest of his life. And then maybe if we named our son, or if someone in our family named their son Kian, maybe it would be my own son's kid, who in 20, 30 years after Kian Pirfalak would make some important scientific breakthroughs and accomplishments, he would become this famous person for the things he got to do with his life, which was taken from him. He did not get that opportunity. I wish that were the case. But being as it were, we are happy to have that as the name of our son, and to carry that forward in that way. And the tragic connection that I was talking about is that it's really heartbreaking that I was a young father, but that both me and my son are named after individuals who were killed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, by this government and this regime, that we shared this tragic connection. And I was, and both deaths were closely after, or happened closely before, I should say, we were born. And that's incredible, 40 plus years apart. And my hope is that I was named for someone who was killed shortly after the revolution happened and this regime took power. And I hope that my son was named after someone who was tragically killed shortly before the end of this regime being in power. So I hope that will be the case, and that that way it's almost like these bookends for us that are family personally of this horrible 47 plus year nightmare that has taken place in this country I've never even gotten to go to because of these people being in power. And so I hope one day I'll get to go with Kian to Iran, even to visit Kian Pir Falak's burial site, and to see that and what a moment that would be, and to share that would be quite beautiful. But I'm hopeful that, of course, things will have to change, and those things do change for that to be possible and for that to happen. So it's a sad tragedy that connects us and our names. One that, as I said, I'm grateful for because it's named after people who it's an honor to be named after, but people who didn't deserve to die when they did, especially as a child, to lose your life is just, horrific. As becoming a father, I've talked about this, that you always know how horrible it feels, or you imagine how horrible it would feel. But when you become a parent, just thinking of something happening to your child, you can feel it on a deeper level. It's kind of like, I think when you become a parent, it's like a new chamber of your heart opens up, a new type of feeling, a new even degree or amount of feeling opens up that you didn't have before. I consider myself a very emotional person even before I became a father, but it's at a different level when you become a parent. And just imagining that, so my heart breaks more and more for Kian Pir Falak's family and what they had to endure. And I hope that this nightmare does end soon for the people, especially the people in Iran and everyone who is outside of the country who is wishing for this to happen as well. So I just wanted to share that with you, this personal part of it. Obviously, it's not about me in any way, but just sharing my personal story or some aspects of it that relate to what we see going on. Let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In this last segment, I wanted to talk about, we talk about the government that we have in Iran, and how horribly they treat their people, and unfortunately we can clearly see what is often the case with people in power, but rather than serving the people as they are supposed to do, they're serving themselves. You see that very clearly there. And not to make this kind of false equivalency, because I think that would be dangerous. But of course, we see that in most governments, that is the case. Now, the degree and the way it's done, there's huge ranges of that. It's a spectrum that we're talking about. And that could range from doing your best with that to doing horrific things and only caring about yourself and the people not mattering to you. I was thinking of the topic I discussed last week in relation to this, which was this kind of like cheesy kind of sounding title of, all humans are just humans, or all people are just people. And there I was talking about it, especially in the context of when we look to people to have all the answers for us, experts, gurus, whatever it might be, that we look to people that can give us some sense of certainty in our uncertain existence as human beings. which is the human condition, or really just a condition of life, is that there's a lot of uncertainty, or the only certainty is death, that the life will end. But another, I know it's very uplifting, maybe it sounds dark, but that's just the dark but very a real reality, and actually can make life feel more beautiful and something worth treasuring and cherishing even more when we recognize that it is fleeting and we don't know how long we will have it, each individual, and how long we will have one another. And so I was trying to bring this message across that, yes, comfort and comes from certainty, or certainty gives us a lot of comfort and helps us put this anxiety at least to rest, or at least can decrease the anxiety we have with this uncertainty. But to engage with life honestly and in reality, we have to accept that uncertainty. So we have to recognize our desire for safety and certainty and comfort in that way, but recognize that it's not real. It's a fiction that we would possibly tell ourselves, and that many people are trying to sell us because they know we're seeking it, and they can make a lot of money, get a lot of attention, fame, all of those things by selling it to us. So we see this process happening time and time again. The way I was thinking of it in this context is that when we have people with any kind of power or authority, the same thing can happen, is that we feel this uncertainty, we feel this sense that the world is a scary place. Our own individual experience can be scary. And then if we're thinking, for example, of a country, we can think, when we have to have enemies or competition from other countries, we want to feel like we can be certain we are going to be okay. We're going to not only survive, but thrive and have, good existence. And so because of that, we could do many things. One is definitely favor the us over them, whatever that might be. But let's say in this case, I'm talking about us and our nation versus everyone else. But we also can look for leaders who we will want for them to be superhuman, to think they are better than us in some way, or superior to us, I should say. They might be, obviously, they should be better to us in some way. If we want them ruling, they should be good at doing that, or whatever it takes to be in power, to have, influence in that way. But it is comforting to think of them as somehow perfect or infallible or superior. And so we see this throughout history, and even currently, that often the people who are in power, or especially if there's some kind of royalty, kings, queens, they are considered superhuman or above humans. And it can seem strange to the subjects. Why should they want that? And of course, there's the systems of power in place, and they have to accept that. But there can be this comfort which comes from, I'm not just being ruled by another person, by another human, I'm being ruled by someone better than human. So there is a safety in that. The pilot of the plane is infallible. It would be a lot better, it's a lot more comforting to think of the pilot of the plane as someone who's almost like a robot, superhuman, rather than, they're human with human frailties. They can make mistakes, they can have physical frailties, all of that. That's not so comforting. And so we actually may want to believe that who we, whether it's we vote for, whoever's in power, has some kind of superhuman powers. And again, the tale as old as time, they will sell that as well. They probably, depending on the era and the culture, won't say I'm superhuman or anything like that, but they might give us that message, or in some way trying to convince us of that, or make us feel that, maybe more than convince us of that, so that we will give them our support, and even our undying support, and even be willing to die for our support of them, because we believe in them and their cause so much. But unfortunately, this is one part of so many that makes it that whoever is, the government, the people that have that power and influence, are treated as superior people, or superior beings to the rest of society. And this is a huge, huge problem, along with another very related problem, which is that those who seek power usually don't want to do good things with it. Or those who seek power usually want to serve themselves, not the people they would be able to serve with that power. And so that's what we see happening time and time again. People who want to be the one in power will usually not want it for the right reasons. It's a paradox, but it's almost like you want people who don't want the power to have the power, like a reluctant leader who's capable, but who is not seeking the power, does not want that because they might actually want to have the authority for the right reasons. They would want to serve the people. And I know this can sound almost like pie in the sky, idealistic, but I do think it's very much possible and really a type of paradigm shift. Maybe it's not such a shift because it's out there already, but really that we would have to move in this direction of seeing all of our roles and responsibilities in this way, or see our roles as responsibilities. Maybe is another way of saying it. I talked in the previous segment about my son Keon, who I'm so grateful to have him and to be his father. And using political type of language, something I've shared before is that as parents, we have to actually be very almost vigilant. Maybe vigilant sounds like a strong word, but to some degree, vigilant that we don't become dictators in our own home or dictators to our own children, because the situation is very much set up for that. You have almost ultimate power and control. Often, what you're doing is very hidden. You're doing things in your home where you don't have to face consequences or any kind of checks and balances of some sort. And you can become drunk with that power, and you can abuse it. And I think realistically, all parents will do that to some degree. Some might be very subtle, but it will happen because there is a sense you have this power, and it can definitely go to your head to use it in ways that are not okay. This might sound crazy to some people, or maybe some people will think, why would anyone ever do that with their kids? But I'm speaking from what I've seen and observed, and also just what to me makes sense from the dynamic standpoint of someone who has that kind of power in a relationship, that it does happen. So, and the truth is, you do have a lot of power as the parent. But this is where I was saying we should think of the role as a responsibility, which it is. You, as a parent, have a lot of power and authority when it comes to your child's life and the household. But we should consider that as the authority that is used in the responsibility to serve our children. So, yes, you have all this power and responsibility, power and authority in the home, but you don't use that for your own benefit to feel good and to make yourself like enjoy your life better. But it's in the act of serving them that you use that power. So yes, you have to make the decisions, not because, aha, I get to choose, you don't get to say anything, but because I, first of all, being, let's say, if you have very young children, am older and wiser to understand some things that you can't, and I have to make the best decisions that will take care of you. Not that feel good to me, give me a good sense of myself, or to just make the decisions feels good, but I make those decisions, and even rather than it just feeling good, I might even be pained to make those decisions because I know they're not easy decisions to make, and I don't know, or I know for a fact I'll get some of them wrong, and I'm going to keep trying to make sure I make the best decisions possible, to not get it wrong and to get it right as often as possible. So the authority is there, the power is there, but we want to consider it as being used in the service of whoever it is that we are serving. Similar to us, talking about a pilot before, the pilot of a plane, or pilots, the crew, they do have more power and authority than other people on the plane. And they should, not in the sense that we should consider them higher status or superior beings, but that, hopefully everyone's comfortable on the plane. But if I'm a passenger on the plane, I want the pilots to be more comfortable than me if we have to pick. If there's not enough food for everyone, let's make sure the pilots are fed so they get us there safely, because they have more of a responsibility. We have to make sure they are more okay during this period of flying the plane. Doesn't mean in every aspect of life, but at this time they have more responsibility and more authority. And so we want to make sure that they are okay, but it's not because they should be pampered and treated as kings and queens and, we should bow to them, but it's because they have this responsibility. And in the act of serving all of the passengers and the crew on the plane, they have to make sure they are okay and that they make the right decisions to make sure we get there safely. And, I know, as I said, this can sound idealistic, but I don't think it is. I mean, there's definitely some ideals here, but I think we can move towards this or have this recognition that when you have a doctor or when we have whatever position of power or status that is there, it doesn't mean we can't have some kind of respect for what they're doing. But not in this state of like deferential, we have to bow down to anyone type of a thing, which is how this can become. And you know, actually, since I've used this pilot analogy a few times, what we see in there's looked at research on this that when there's a sense that, let's say, there's a pilot and a co-pilot, and there's a huge differential that you know the pilot is superior and always right and shouldn't be questioned, and the co-pilot feels that they shouldn't question them, and there's this very strong sense of authority and obedience that should be there. It's actually leading to less safe outcomes for these planes and for, of course, everyone on those planes. Because the whole point of having a co pilot there, amongst things like probably doing some extra things, but really importantly, is to have another set of eyes, experienced eyes, to be looking at the situation and seeing what's going on, to possibly catch errors the pilot is making or possibly catch things the pilot is not seeing, and to be able to bring those things up. But if the co pilot doesn't feel it's appropriate to say anything, they often might not. And this can show how powerful these types of these feelings of norms and what's okay and not okay could be, where we're literally talking about life or death types of situations, your own life and the lives of many other people. But you look at the transcripts of flights that have ended in crashes, and often you'll see there is some clear sense that the co-pilot knew something was wrong and maybe brought it up in some subtle or indirect way, but then backed down and didn't clearly state what they were clearly seeing because of this type of cultural norm that it's not okay to say something to the person in power and person in authority. So it's literally leading to worse outcomes. And here we're talking about life or death outcomes. So we need to have, you know, it's not saying, okay, now everyone is the pilot and we all go into the, you know, cockpit and fly the plane together. So it's not saying everyone is equal in that kind of a way, but there is this importance of recognizing that the authority or power that someone is given is not to serve themselves, it's to serve their role and to serve the people of whatever that role is. So if it's a pilot, to serve, you know, all the passengers and the crew to make sure everyone gets there safely. If it's a teacher, it's to serve the students. And so teachers also can become dictators and, you know, get power drunk. If they go, okay, I want to do whatever I want, or I have control over what happens here, and that can feel really good. But that is not what we want. What we do want is for them to have the authority of the classroom, but in service of making it the best learning experiences for the students, not so they can feel good and you know, have the power and to enjoy that. And so similarly, we want our governments to function this way too. But unfortunately, we very strongly have this sense that they have to be seen as superior or treated as superior to everyone else, when really they are just in a very big position of service. So I don't mean servant in the way of looking down on someone, but they are servants just like as parents, we are servants to our children. We're not their servants as in, they look down on us, but we are serving them. My role is to serve my son, or to be the best father I can be to serve him, not to feel good or to get that good feeling from it or from him, but to serve him as his father, to fill that responsibility, that role. And so similarly, our governments should be for the people. I know it's like even part of, you know, the U.S. Mottos, but really should be for the people, functioning in that way. And so any government should function in that way. What we see with the people of Iran and the government of Iran, it's not functioning that way at all. They are not serving the people, the best interests of the people. They're serving themselves and people that are close to them. And even in whatever ways they do serve the people, it's to make sure they keep them happy enough so they don't take away their power or try to take away their power. But we need to see a shift in this direction in general, in all aspects of life, but especially when it comes to bigger positions of power. That even though the feeling is, well, they have this very big role or position, so they must be superior, But no, that's not the case. They just have a bigger responsibility, or a very specific big responsibility, which is important. But we shouldn't be bowing down to everyone. To just echo last week's show, all humans are still humans, even if they are the president or the prime minister or whatever position it is. They're still human beings and should be treated as such, even if they're given some special authority or special access to things, to have that responsibility. But they're still servants at the end of the day, serving the people, the constituents, whatever that role might be. So to conclude the show, again, my thoughts are with the people of Iran, wishing all the best for them and hoping for change to be swift, and that we will see the end of this regime very soon. Thinking of all the people there, and thinking all of you around the world who are also having those same thoughts, but especially with the people of Iran, our thoughts are with you. Thank you to Farid in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Zan Zendegi Azadi.